Okay, does everybody see that on the screen now?
It looks just great, George, and we are
Okay.
recording today's session.
Okay, great. So welcome to weathering. It's just some of the products I found that are made life easier for me for weathering and stuff I've learned off other guys. To start with, if I'm doing a plastic model that's, or a freight car or a plastic building of some sort, I usually give it a base coat before I add any powders or PanPastels or chalk. It works kind of as a see-through that makes it just makes it look a lot better. So I use oh, sorry, we're jumping here. So I use flat black. There's a primer red. You have to, if you use a sandable one, like this one's sandable, it's actually extra thick. So if it's a fine detail, you want one that's not sandable. And Camel Coats, Home Hardware have two really good colors to use. On any metal parts, I use cast iron, which is a nice color for trucks and underbodies and chimneys and all that kind of stuff. On wood, as my base coat, I normally use creosote black and grime, one over top of the other. Years ago, weathering mix was available, which is the same as creosote black. So if you run across a bottle of that, that's the same thing. Excuse me. So the first tones I used when I first started weathering was chalk. So I've got a variety of chalks, which have worked really well over the years. And you can see on this structure here, it's got a coat of hunterline stain and then grime, and then the rest is all just done with chalks. Then I moved probably 10-15 years ago. I started to use Bragdon powders, which I found really good. I almost didn't use chalk anymore after that. Here's 8 of the shades that I normally like using, and I still use them today. So today I use a mix of all the products I have: the chalks, PanPastels, and Bragdon powders. And one of the questions I get asked all the time about PanPastels is, do you seal your models? And I never do. And most of the guys I talk to that apply them, they don't either. It's easy to fix. It sticks really well to your models. And if you do have a spot that needs a touch up, you just grab your brush and just rub it down over, and all is well. So there's a lot of colors in PanPastels. They're about $8.99 a pod, so they can get expensive. So it's best just to pick ones that you really think you can use, and forget about all the rest. Now you can use sponges. A lot of the PanPastels come with sponges. They do a pretty good job, but I have more control with brushes. So I use everything from the micro brushes up to a good quality set of brushes with different size tips. My best color I use is raw umber shade. So if you were only going to buy one color and try it, raw umber shade would be the one I suggest you'd buy and use. It's a dirty looking color, so it just gives everything a dirty look and appearance. And before I apply any PanPastels or chalks or Bragdon powders, I always give the model a flat finish of whatever your favorite flat finish is that you like using. The other thing is, if you're using the primers like Primer Gray or the Auto Body Red, they're good. You don't have to put a flat finish, but pretty much everything else I put a flat finish over it. And my second choice is this color right over here. So that's Red Iron Oxide Extra Dark. So that's a good color to put over top of a boxcar. If you have a boxcar red finish or a barn that's brown, that's a nice coat to put over top, and it gives you that little bit of a see-through and a dull look to whatever the model is. And it kind of covers up the lettering. It doesn't look quite as bright. And when I apply these colors too, you want to do it really light. You don't need to do it really heavy. You just go over light. The color in the middle, I don't use it quite as often. It's burnt sienna shade, but that's a lighter color. So if you got a lighter color car, you might want to use that one. My third and fourth choices are in the gray tone. So neutral gray, which is the one in the middle, that's the light gray. That's maybe my best color for weathering. Any streaking I do on the roofs, down from window sills and stuff like that. And hopper cars, you got a gray hopper car, just a coat of that over it makes a big difference. So that's number 3. Number 4 is the neutral gray extra dark. That's my black color. So you don't really want to use a black on stuff, but use a really dark gray. It kind of gives you your best look to it. The furthest one over is neutral gray shade, so that's an in-between. So if you're going to buy 3 gray colors for shading, those would be the 3. So my number 5 color is titanium white. It's just mixed in with a couple other shades here that I use every now and then. So the white is really good for like any kind of streaking that you want to do on it, or a gray building that you want to have a bit of a white tone to it. This green that I use here, it's chrome oxide green. It's almost the same color as the old Flocal Depot green. It's like if you've got a structure painted and you want that a green tone to the window, you just brush that on. And the furthest one over, I did an article a while back on fading paint colors. So if you're doing a boxcar or any kind of a rolling stock, just brushing a very light coat of that over really gives it a faded appearance, and it's very simple to do. Like in a matter of minutes, you can fade down the look of a car. And the last shade is, of course, it's a rust color. It's burnt sienna. I don't use it as much. I kind of use my Bragdon powders. I've got 3 tones of Bragdon rust in the one little container, and they do a good job. But big areas, a lot of times I'll give it a dusting of PanPastels over it. So this is a Walther's structures. All I did, it was built, and that's the coloring that's in the plastic. All I did was give it a flat finish, and those 4 shades that you see there, that's all I used on it to get it looking as it did. And that probably only took maybe 15-20 minutes at the most. So kind of neat what you can do with PanPastels, and you don't want to put it on heavy. So I usually, you can see I've got a white pad here. I just put a bit on the brush, wipe it off on the pad, and then apply it to the structure. One thing with PanPastels, you can wash them off. If you don't like what you see there, you just put it under the tap and it all comes off. So it's actually an easy thing to do, and it's safe. You can always get your structure looking like it originally did. Another is on wood, is using PanPastels chalks on wood, and this is a Foscale kit, and I started out by giving it a coat of creosote black as a base coat, and then from there I just painted on the colors that I wanted. So I've used Bragdon antique iron and red chalk on the lower part, as you can see there. And I just mix them both together. It's just, one over top of the other. They seem to work well blending together. And on the corner trims, I use either a micro brush or a really fine brush. This fine brush that you see up here, it's worn down to a stub, so it works good for rubbing along there, and it gives you that weathered look. Like most times with kits, they tell you, paint the walls, do that when you're prior to assembling them. I actually like assembling them and then adding the colors after, because that's basically how you build a building, and then you paint it after. You don't paint all those sections and then stick it together, and it kind of gives you that bit of blending between the different colors. So in the lower photo, you see the greens I've used. So once again, there's that PanPastel, kind of the olive green look, and then I just use some dark green chalk. So between the two, mixing them back and forth, it kind of gives you a nice effect. And there's kind of an overall look at what it does. Now, the nail holes, I find when you're using the chalks, the PanPastels, they'll fill a lot of those features in. So I actually add those after. So they're not quite as straight as if you would be doing them prior to, but it still gives you effect, and they're not full with powders and chalks. And there's the back wall of the same building. So you can still see some of the gray in there from the original coating. And the plastic windows, you know, they're the same. They were just, everything's just painted with PanPastel and chalk. So this is a small barn, large shed that I built a while ago. And I started again with the Hunter line stain, and then added the red oxide. So that's my number 2 PEX, the red oxide on the edges and along the corner, and gave it a bit of a brush over. And then I just highlighted it all with chalk on there, and it came out pretty good. So there's the finished building on my layout. You can still see some of the coloring showing through. It just a kind of a nice effect instead of painting it with paint. So here's another little project I was working on, is AHM structure. So you can pick these up for $1 or $2 at the train shows whenever they come around again. So that's spray bombed with the auto body red, and that's the one that is a little more coarse, but the details are quite thick on these, so you don't have to worry about filling in fine details. And I just painted it all with PanPastel brown, and then the windows, I just highlighted them all with a creamy colored chalk. And we'll take a look here. And that's how it looks once it's all done. The roof was painted black, and the grays tones were used on it. And also my raw umber shade. So that was my number 1 pick. I seem to run that over everything as the final coat, just to give it that gungy look. So this is supposed to be a Grand Trunk, New England station. The station sign is one that I photocopied out of a book and added it on. The colors are kind of like what CN would have had, you know, in that era. So, you know, for $1 kit with a bit of paint and a bit of PanPastel, you can make a pretty nice little model. So about a year after I built it, I went back. I started highlighting some of the shingles on some of my structures, and I've always done that with the ones that are on strip, because you can just run the streaks down, and then when you put them on, they're random. But on a plastic building, it's a little trickier. So I mixed these 2 colors together. They're graphite and rainy day gray, and then just dab them randomly on some of the shingles. And then this is right over top of the PanPastels and chalk and everything that was already on the roof. You can actually paint right over it. It'll stick. And then I just give it another overcoat, as you can see in the lower picture of this, just with the brush, just go over it again. And that's what you get. You kind of get a little bit of an extra detail on the roof, which kind of adds a bit to the structure. And that was my first version. I did that at Train Fest 2018. No, 2019, I guess it was. And that's same thing. This was just a plain gray roof. That's one of the Menards buildings. I did that for a friend of mine. And I used AK stain. That's a rust stain. And I just kind of, even though it's a rust stain, it still looks good on the roof. And I just randomly hit some of the shingles. And after this is done, it still will get a coat of PanPastels over top to blend it all together. So anytime you highlight any of the shingles, they look kind of stark at first, but once you hit it with some of the PanPastels, it blends it right in. Another little project I did a while back, this was in the car magazine a few years back, is I bought an old Atlas water tank for, I think it was $1, and just painted it flat black, and then I just painted it all with, there's no paint here at all. It's all just PanPastel. So there's browns, grays, and button here. And looking down at the roof, you can see all the different colors that I've added in. There's about 3 different tones of PanPastels, and the same on the tank. And the thing is, if you don't like it, you just put it under the tap and it all washes off and you start it over again. Another view of the lower area. And I use a lot of chalk on the trims, like white chalk or white PanPastel. And this is an N scale building. And most of the time I just apply it with micro brushes. It works best. One thing with N scale compared to HO or O scale is when you use powders and chalks, you got to go a lot lighter with them. I found that I build up too much and it just doesn't quite look right. And what I've done, I just recently finished a big barn that was an N scale, and I used all my regular techniques for HO, but in N scale, it just didn't look right. So what you can do once you're done is you can give it, if it's on wood, you can give it a wash with alcohol and India ink over top, or just I just use sometimes lacquer thinner over top of the whole building, and it just kind of makes it all stick and blend in better into all the little details. So that's an easy fix. So we're just looking at some of the other products I use. There's Valero and AK stains and rust engine oil for on some of my engines and rolling stock. Okay, continue on. So this is a little building I picked up. That's how it looked when I bought it, and I just wanted to try it. It's easy when you buy these little buildings already pre-built at the show, and you get them for, you know, a nice price. You can play around with them, and if you don't like them, you just get rid of them. So on this one, I did the doors with AK wood wash over top, and the walls were kind of, if you can see, they're kind of, I don't know, some kind of a gray. I went over with white and a bit of PanPastel gray, just right over top of what was already on it. I didn't do anything other than putting a flat finish on it, and it really kind of started to look pretty good. And on the roof, I actually had this model at a few of the little clinics I was doing that were hands-on for guys, just showing how you rust up metal roofs and that. And so there's 2 or 3 different products on it. But one of the ones I really like using, and this was passed on this by Jim Sloan. This is something he used a lot, and we talked one time, and he kind of got me going on using this. So it's actually a really, if you're going to buy any kind of a rust stain, that would be your first one to get, because it's got a lot of nice applications, and it'll highlight your roof really nice. So here's the finished model. And one of the things that's easy to practice on, like if you're just starting, and I haven't been weathering like buildings and stuff like that, like it's only been 2 or 3 years now that I've actually been doing it, like other than maybe airbrushing over it with dust and stuff like everybody used to do, and add a bit of chalk. But signs for buildings, you photocopy a sheet of signs and cut them out, and you can start practicing doing the rust on the edges, all around the edges, as you can see there. And if you don't like them, you can throw it away. It didn't cost you anything, and just move on to the next one. But all the signs, I like adding a bit of texture and coloring and rust to them. So you can see this is on one of the mills I have. So I rusted up the blue seal sign. And these are some of the signs that came with it. So they're getting a coat of that's Bragdon powders and a bit of acrylic on it. That's best kit. And once it's attached, even I sometimes streak down with a micro brush. That'd be a bit of Bragdon powders that's being streaked down from the edges of the sign. And sometimes if you get too much on, just go over it with a brush and pull it down. You can see one of my other structures with the rusted up signs on there. Now this is a Menards kit that I was doing for a friend of mine, and I rusted up his sides. This sign here is just like a shiny plastic, so it got a coating of Bragdon powders on the edges, and PanPastel blender over there to fade the sign down, but it was kind of curling up on the edges, so I just kind of touched all the edges that were curled up with a bit of rust, and it all kind of blended in, so you don't even notice it. Another kind of sign that you put on structures is a Foscale kit is they give you these cutout stencils so that, yeah, you just tape them on the side and then you sponge in your color. This one's got a white background and then you sponge on the red, but they have highlights on them, as you can see in this next picture. You can see this is a picture of the model here, and you want to kind of get the edges done in a blackish tone. So you just take a micro brush, a little bit of PanPastel, rub it down the edges, and you kind of get this nice effect. You can get the little bits of black showing through here and there. So that's actually 3 shades. You've got the white, then the red sponged on, and then the black. And on this one, the fish one, you do the exact same thing, but it had a red outline on it. So that was red chalk. Just use a micro brush, just run it along the edge a bit, and you get the sign that you want. For other buildings, it's just simple. It's just tape it on. And I like using these sponges. They're just cut out of, you know, any kind of packing material I get. I just save some of it and dab it on the side here of my cardboard that I'm working on, and dab it on the building, and it gives you a nice effect. And you can see some streaking down, so that would be either PanPastel gray or PanPastel white, just a bit of a wash down on it. And once again, that's another Fosskill. That's one of their kit of the months. Same thing for getting your finish. It's just Hunter Line weathering mix, so it's gray color underneath, and then just sponge on white. And then when you're done, just put the stencil on and just lightly sponge on the black. So nothing too tricky about that. So this is an O-scale structure for the O-scale guys. I picked up at one of the shows, and you know, it was kind of neat. It was made out of plaster. It's four pieces of plaster wall, and then a piece of cardstock with some shingling on it. And I wasn't really sure, you know, what I was going to do with it, but this is how it turned out in the end. I added some trim around the window in a stack. But for the coloring on here, I started out with some of the green tones, some of the gray, all PanPastels. So I got about 4 coats of different color PanPastels on there. And when I got done, it didn't look right. For some reason, it just didn't all work. So I gave it a wash of India ink and alcohol over top of it. And it really, it just pulled it all together. It just seemed like everything seeped down along the edges of these board and battens, and, you know, in the corners, some, you know, the powders, and some was stayed on the building and some ran off, but it actually looked really good. So I was really happy how it turned out. So there's always, you know, when you get something and it's not totally what you want, you can change it by just applying something else over top. Now we're looking at a few pieces of rolling stock. I wanted to do a couple pieces that had a totally rusted roof. So I started off with cinnamon brown. I also use this for painting my wheels, the inside of the faces of the wheels, and that. It's dollar store paint, so it really doesn't cost you a lot. It's a great big bottle. And I just paint the whole roof with it. Just 1 coat, and that's all you need. And then after that, I, So once I get that on the, I use AK, it's a crusted rust. Now it goes on dark, but it comes out really bright. And I just dab it on spots. And then there's my Valero rust texture that I add here and there. And then once I get that on, I go over top of the roof and the sides with different PanPastels. So that PanPastel is a burnt Sierra shade over the roof, and you can kind of see highlights of some of the different colors in there, and it just kind of give it a good look. So on the side, I use the colorless blender, so that kind of gives you a look at how it fades down by just adding that over the gray. So you really don't need to do a lot, and it kind of makes it look kind of neat. And on the layout and sitting finished on my workbench. And I did a second car. If you get the NMRA magazine, this was in last year. That was an air slide that I did up, and used the same technique. So those are my 2 rusty roof cars. You see those here and there, and it's kind of neat to have one for on the layout. So now I moved on, and this is maybe 6 months ago, I did this Athearn. It's a 50-foot patched box car. So the whole car got a flat coat of flat finish. And then on the roof, what I do over the flat finish is I apply India ink and alcohol mix. So it kind of gives you that oxidized look to it. And then I touch it with a Vallejo rust texture. There's AK dark rust deposit and rust streaks applied. Not a lot, just a bit here and there on it. And once it's all done, then I go with my #1 choice raw umber shade and give it a coat over and kind of can see how the roof looks. Just a few little rust spots on the side. You don't really want to get too much in those clean panels because that should have just been painted recently, so it wouldn't have any rust on it. And there's the model on the layout. So it's a neat little car with, now for these rust spots too, I just use either the Vallejo rust texture or AK rust streak, and I just dab a little dot, and then I use my micro brush once it's dry, tap it in the metal with rust, and just drag it down a bit just on each of them. So you can do this car in like an afternoon using the acrylics and the pastels, whereas if you're doing oils and that, you have to wait for it to dry between each. Now this is another thing that Jim Sloan showed to me last fall on one of these cars. He had done a roof just with rust texture. So this one you can see it's got being applied to the green. That's the first coat, and that's the third coat on. So once that was dry, then you just go over it with your PanPastels with a bit of the rust or, the browns or whatever. And it kind of gives you a really cool effect without hardly any effort at all. Just doing that roof, even though the car's not finished, you can see I wanted to see how it looked. You can have that done in no time at all. It's very simple. And once again, there's another car. So that's my alcohol mix. So it's 70%. If you're using this, like a lot of times I'll use this on my wood structures too. So you want 70% or higher alcohol content. If you have like 50% or lower, you're getting a lot of water in it, and it'll make your wood structures warp a lot. So the higher it is, the better it is for wood. But on plastic, it doesn't really matter. But 70% that you get at the dollar store and works good. So flat finish on first, then a mix of this, and a little bit of rust after added on, and you can kind of have a neat looking roof. This was a Denver Rio Grande Western narrow gauge car that I bought partly built, and I wanted a tool car for my ON30 main 2-foot, so I decided to convert it a bit. So I gave it a main 2-foot style of door. There was no roof or anything. The side walls were built, but nothing had been assembled. So I kind of wanted it to look really ratty looking. So I individually added all these roof pieces and weathered it up. So first coat was my Hunterline weathering mix, and then a bit of Flocal grime, and then the rest is all just highlighted. It's just all PanPastels. I didn't use anything but PanPastels on this. So by just adding little bits here and there, that's what it came out to look like. And it's looking down at the roof, kind of a neat effect. And I added a bit of detail inside the door, a sign on it, and yeah, kind of a neat little model. So once again, this was in the structure was in the start of the presentation. It's a branch line model kit of a structure that's still standing at Danby, and I took some pictures of it, so I wanted to look the same as what I saw. And I started with Hunterline stain, and then the grime went over top of that, but as a wash. And I do it all with the Flocal colors while it's still wet. This is kind of a stinky project I don't use Flocals that much anymore other than the grime for the base coat, but I actually put a real light coat of wash of black over top of that. The reds are actually chalk, and the red paint here just brushed on, but very, very thinly. And if it looks too thick, you just add more thinner over top and it brings it back down. And then once you get it to this looking like this, the rest is just done with chalk. So I did this maybe 10 years ago. So you can use, you know, lacquers and these paints, which kind of a good thing if you're doing it outside. It's not great in the house. So that's the finished model. So once one side is weathered, is what would be to the weathered side, and the ends are more of a darker red. And that's it on the layout. And that's Northeastern Barns. Use the same technique as what I did on the coal dock. More red on that and less on here, and just some streaks down. That's all just chalk streaked down. Okay, something that's fairly new out, maybe a year and a half. It's been around for modelers, train modelers at least, is AK weathering pencils. Kind of a neat little thing that you can use. Whoops. Get this going the right way. Sorry, guys. I got it. Oh, yeah, okay. So I bought 3 or 4 pencils at when I was down at Train Fest B 2019, just to experiment with. And since then, I ordered 5 packs of a couple different shades, rust shade, and the other one is black and white. There, you get 5 pencils for $10, which isn't bad. And I use them for highlights, like on these ribs, on the rungs and that. It just kind of gives you a neat effect. On this covered bridge I was doing, I was weathering with my PanPastels, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. I'll use some of these pencils I have. Well, this is a whitish, it's dust rain marks, and I just kind of streaked it down. This side isn't done, but you can see just by streaking it down randomly, it didn't matter if it was in the grooves or not, it kind of gives you a really neat highlight. So that's a simple thing. And, you know, once, even with buildings that you've already got built, you can just go back with one of these pencils and just see what it does with it. And, so, you know, structure can always be updated a bit. So I find a lot of my models are never finished. I'm always going back doing something. So in the grooves, I've used one of the darker colors. This is Intermountain TH&B model. And I also used smoke and dirty white on the insides, just to highlight a few of the seams and that. And once you add some of the other textures, then it all seems to blend together really nice. So that's the finished model there. And once again, there's my gunmetal, and I'm just running it. You can see I've done the seams, so you've got rivets on there. So I just run it down the rivets, and it kind of, you know, without any other weathering on it, it adds a little bit to it. And then I put a bit on the ladder. The roof is done with the India ink and alcohol over top of the flat finish, so you kind of get a little bit of a weather there. Now this is a Rapido, one of their double sheath box cars. So when I bought it, I decided to see what I could do with it. And the sides, the sides have got some PanPastel brown, so that's my go-to for over the walls. But then I got this new product, which is dark rust. That I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. And I actually added on the roofs and, you know, on some of the little spots here. It didn't look bad, but I wasn't totally happy with how it looked. But, you know, it blended in with all the other cars. But well, 2 months ago, I noticed this article in RMC where it appeared like this guy had used pencils on his car or something similar to, which kind of stood out so I thought I'd give that a try. And I used the grays and the blacks, and I just ran some down randomly here and there. And I thought the roof looked just too rusty looking, and I wanted to highlight a bit. So that's just acrylic gray, rainy day gray over top as a wash. And I thought that really added a lot to the final look of the car. And you can see all the pencil marks on there. So just by adding those on there randomly, I thought it just added a bit to the look of the car. Another car, that's a TH&B car. What I'm showing you here is I did the roof with gray PanPastel or yeah, gray PanPastels on the roof, but it was really, really white looking, and I just didn't like it. So when I was had the spray gun out and I was doing some other spray jobs, I just gave it a real light overcoat of grimy black, and it just toned it right down. So, you know, I guess that one's one of the cars that I actually sealed my PanPastel, because the PanPastel is now sealed on there, but it just toned it right down. So, you know, you can do that too if you find it's too bright. Just a bit of the base coat that you've put on. It could be on the side of a boxcar, your boxcar red or gray or whatever. It just changes it a bit. So here's an experiment I did. I did an article for RMC on the pencils, and I took two pieces. That's a piece of plastic. It's supposed to be corrugated metal. Spray painted it gray, and that's actually Campbell siding that I did gray. And then I just took some of the pencils that I just recently had got, and just thought I'd see what they do. And so I started with a rust color on the panel. And what they told me is that with a damp brush, you don't want it wet because it moves it, but with a damp brush, you can run it over top of your pencil marks, and it'll spread it out and kind of blend it in. So I gave it a try, and it started to look pretty good. Then I went back and you know, tried a few different colors on it. Another thing is you can actually, with a damp brush, touch your pencil and then apply it to your model. And there's a bit of dust going on it. So, and then I decided to do a bit of sponging on it. So this slimy grime green is kind of a neat color for, and then build a silver. Since it's going to be metal, you want to have that silver look. So I sponge a bit of silver, and this is what it looked at. So there's a bunch of pencil underneath and then a bit of sponging over top. We're good to go. So there's, the tips are very soft. So if you sharpen them, they break off, save them, because you can use them for dabbing with your brush. So this one's got these three colors over top of the metal siding. And then I just wetted it, blended all in, just playing around with it, just seeing what it did. And, you know, it didn't look bad. And then I decided to go back over it with a bit of streaky white. Oops. And then I added a bit of rust texture and AK rust streaks on the joints, just to kind of give it a different look. And there's the two of them side by side. So turned out a lot better than I thought for first time trying pencils. And also here's another wood building, and I use the dust rain marks and just run them in the seams. And, you know, you can kind of see the marks where they all are, and kind of gives you a neat effect. And that model had been already finished for a few months, and I decided to see what it'll do if I add some of the pencil marks on there. This is a Best model freight house. Once again, you can see the streaks, so the lighter white pencils are making marks where the doors would open and close. And then, you know, you get the weather, and you get a bit of rot. I use the darker color pencil on the bottom, so kind of gives you a little bit different effect that you might not be able to do with a brush. Same on the roof. There's a bit of the lighter color on some of the seams just to kind of highlight it a bit. And this is a mill that I bought. Once again, at the show, everything's the same color, and I started out by just sponging some silver on it. Then I used my different products, the rust texture and a bit of the rust streaks. Just dab one over top of the other so that, you know, you see a little bit of both of them. And then I use Bragdon powders, just touch it up and then pull it down with your brush. I do most of that with the micro brush, so it kind of gives you a nice effect on the roof. Then on the walls, being, you know, there was a large area that needed to be covered, and I didn't think the PanPastels would do it on its own, so I used, let's see what color that is. That's Rust Red by Anitas. Anitas you can get in the States at about 80 cents a container. And I sponged that all over the side, and then I actually used some of the rust texture and sponged it over, so there was a base coat underneath. And then I started getting it with the PanPastels, and this is kind of what you get. And then just some of the lighter colors are streaked down for as stains. The signs are all rusted up. And once again, you can see all the signs I've added to it. That's just a straw. It didn't have a spout on it, so added a straw. Things looking good. Now, AK, I just found this a while back, as a 3-pack, and it's called a rolling stock weathering set. You get a wash in there, and you get 2 pigments. One is steel, and one is rust. And I found this to be a really good value because these 3 colors are stuff you use all the time. So this car on the inside, I just gave it a whole coat of wash all over the floors. Then I tipped it upside down, and then the stuff kind of ran up from the corners into kind of points there. And then I just used the rust colors and just kind of streaked it down. That's a powder. Same with the floor. I did the center area of the floor, just the dark steel, and then a bit of the lighter rust or dark rust around the edges. You can see there's some watermarks in there. I just used the engine oil, Valerio engine oil, and just kind of put it in the seams. And on the underbody, I did the same thing. It was kind of a quick and easy thing to do. So I just used the wash first, hit it with a bit of the dark steel in certain areas where the metals are, and then some of the dark rust. And it actually looked pretty good. That was done in like maybe 5 minutes. And also on the trucks, I used to spray it this cast iron gray, which, you know, gives the trucks a kind of a neat metal look, and then just a bit of weathering on it. But I found just by brushing on this dark steel over it, it gives you the same effect done in seconds without any spraying. You don't have to take the model outside to spray anything. Okay, metal corrugated roof. I found these little brushes that are micro brush disposable, but you can reuse them. They're adjustable. This thing pulls out, so you can get it longer or shorter depending on what you need. And I start off with rust texture over top of the material. Then I use some of the dark rust pigment, the AK that we saw, and I just streaked it down. And then for the final coat, the dark steel over top. One thing I should tell you, the brushes I use for PanPastels and these pigments and all that I keep them separate from my regular brushes that I use with paint. So you want 2 sets of brushes, one for doing your weathering and one for your painting. And that's the final effect. You can use the same washes and powders on wood. So that same rolling stock set, I began by just giving it a wash on a door that's supposedly metal, but it's actually a wood wall or wood door in the kit. Then I hit it with a bit of dark steel, mainly in the metal area. And then the dark rust is on the edges, around the edges. And I thought it worked out pretty good. And there's the final door. So those 3 products, even though they're for rolling stock, they work good on any kind of metal. Always got little cars and, oops. This rust texture works really good with a fine brush, just adding a few rust spots on the car. It's kind of a really neat effect. And this is just was a cast metal for putting out in scrap yard or out in the field or something. And I just played around with my pencils shortly after I got, and some of my Bragdon powders, I did add a bit of rust texture and a bit of local rust on there, but it was mainly the pencils. And that's what I come up with, just playing around with it. So, and this is just getting near the end here. I've just got a bunch of random pictures that I've just done recently. So there's another Foscale kit, that's Northeastern roofing. So they come with tar paper roofing mainly, all these kits. So I changed it around a bit. So I put some of this Northeast, it's kind of a paper cardboard texture, but it looks like corrugated roofing, and it actually works quite well. And the same kind of Bar Mills has it included in some of their kits. So once again, there's a bit of rusted up roofing. And that's the same, that's scrap pieces. So this is for a diorama that I built for taking photos. It goes in the background, and just rusted it up a bit. box cars, once again, you can see the markings from the pencils and just some of the rust texture, not a lot. That's a national scale car mini kit. I used that's a branch line body. Just added kind of a kit bash. And you find these at the flea markets all the time, some of these old kits. And this one had some nice steel wheels, trucks, and had Katy couplers on it. So when you see them for $2, it's worth it for the parts. But what do you do with the body after? So I just spray painted it gray. It was a home road car. Under here, there's the name of the layout that it was from. And the rest is just PanPastels, just kind of the browns are dragged over the gray to kind of give it a weathered look. And once again, that's another national scale car mini kit, and that's done with Intermountain car. And you can see some of the rust. All these rust is done with rust texture. Not a lot of weathering on it, but a bit. And most of the time, there's a very, very light coat of red iron oxide dark rust, the PanPastel color just over top of it. And on engines, one thing that I learned, this is just off a YouTube video that I watched one time, is you get that paint peeling effect on the engines. So this is done with Anita Rainy Day Gray. You just dab it on really kind of with a really wet brush, so it kind of blends in a little bit, and it's just very see-through. And then you hit it with a bit of red in behind, and you get kind of a neat little effect. And then you just dust it over with your Bragdon powders, and you're good to go. So here's the engine in a scene, but what I really wanted to show you was this structure here. Even though the roof's weathered, that's all that got weathered on it. You don't have to really weather a whole structure. You just, what stands out mostly is the roof on it. So all I did was weather the roof. The rest of the body has no coloring or weathering or textures or anything added to it. It's just straight paint. In my backdrop scene, in my back alley, I had a bunch of leftover parts, so I was trying to make some buildings out of them, and here's one that I did. So just a little bit of everything that I've got that added on there. Signs are rusted up. For the mortar mix, I use Robert's mortar mix formula. It kind of works really good, kind of cover it all in. Just some broken windows, plywood that's from Roomettes. They have sheets of plywood that you can add in the background. Another Foscale building, so it shows just the weathered gray on there, hardly any paint. It's just a bit of white that's been sponged on there, but doesn't really show that much. You can see a little bit more there, but you can see all the signs have been rusted up a bit and then streaked down with powders or PanPastels, whichever one you like the best. This is one of the structures Brian Smith gave to me to see what I could do with it. It's an old kit. Don't recall the name of the kit, but a lot of the stuff when you buy a kit, it isn't really that great. Like, it had flimsy cardboard roofing, which was all sagged, and he tried to use it, but it just didn't work. So those are styrene pieces I added, and then tar paper roll roofing is added. Once we get back into our hands-on days that we can do WOD clinics, that's one of the clinics we're going to do when we build one of our little structures. Everybody will learn how to do a roof like that. And once again, there's our northeastern bit of roofing on there, and all the coloring on that is, everything is just done with Bragdon powders and PanPastels. And you can see the signs, and add a bit of wire on the window, and you see the signs have all been rusted. And some of the Valero engine oil has been dripped in here, and also on the barrels along the bottoms and the sides. So you can add your weathering to almost anything. Another building, that's a Foscale old scale building, and same thing. Most of the weathering is PanPastels. The sides are all the PanPastel white, just over the gray for the coloring. Look at the other side. And these structures I build all the structure. The whole, other than this piece, is weathered and painted first and then added on. but all the white is painted on, then the trim is painted. So you can build it and then paint it after using PanPastels and chalks and whatever. This is a Foss scale model also, the ice house. It originally came, when I first built it, it wasn't weathered this much, and about 6 months after I built it, I thought, oh, I can go back over. This window had a flaw in it, and I didn't have another window to fit it, so I decided just to board it up. I added the tar paper roof on that I mentioned that we'll learn how to do at one of our hands-on shows, and then I rusted the sign up. The sign was kind of, you know, really good looking, and I decided to rust it up, and I sponged a bit of the rust texture on the bottoms and that, and it's good to go. And there's another one that's got mainly the PanPastel white, and I sponged on a bit of acrylic white on the windows and trim and doors. So give it that kind of gungy look. And this is a structure that Brian Smith has got on his layout that I bought at a show. It looked like it was scratch built. I left the windows as they were. They were kind of broken up, but something you'd see on an old mill building. And a lot of the stuff I showed you earlier, there's the rust effects on it. I never painted that. I just hit it with flat finish and then just went with powders and the grays and the whites. So it's all just all the different effects. And that's it.
George, thank you very, very much.
I think I'm on time too.
Yes, well done. If you want to
Stop share.
stop your share, yeah. And
Okay.
I'll just bring up